As the new Narendra Modi government gets into gear, the full union budget for FY 2025, which is scheduled on 23rd of July, will be the government's first big economic statement. The industry's expectations are centered on how the government will resume its path of strategic growth and sustainable development. We have with us Soumya Kanti Ghosh, Group Chief Economic Advisor of SBI, now joining us to take us through what's going to be critical and what's a want and what's a need of the hour for India. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh, for joining us this morning. Mr. Ghosh, of course, I'll delve into your report a little bit more, but to just set up this conversation, the big focus has been the big bonanza from the RBI. Last time around at the interim budget, there was talk about what global investors could do to spruce up a balance sheet. We've got included on the JP Morgan bond index, not too much in terms of flows just yet. But where do you think the government's stance of fiscal prudence will be, and how critical is the fiscal consolidation path, not just out a year, but over the medium term going to be?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I think the fiscal path is always important for a country like India. And given the fact that we have passed through periods of significant uncertainty in the last 3 to 4 years, the fiscal situation actually was, we were on a path of consolidation, but unfortunately the pandemic had put us back. But the good thing is that we have pulled back the deficit from a high of 9.2% in the pandemic year to 5.6% this year, and hopefully the budget could take it closer to 5%, if not lower. Of course, the RBI dividend is going to act as a counter-cyclical buffer to the fiscal policy, which is the need of the hour. And given the fact that India has been rewarded as a country in terms of global capital inflows, in terms of an attractive investment destination, in terms of the movements in the interest rates, and also in terms of investment intentions, I think the government cannot abandon the path of fiscal consolidation. The only difference which we can see is that maybe the government could go a little slow on the fiscal consolidation. Instead of aggressive consolidation, it can still pursue to the market that it is clear on its agenda of taking the fiscal deficit to 4.5% by FY 26. I don't know whether the government wants to take it lower, or is there a need to take it lower. But even if the government, and we believe that the fiscal deficit could be set a little below 5% in the budget, if not at 5%, to show the intent that the government is keen on consolidation fiscal deficit. One interesting point which I'd like to point out is that in the past, if you look into the interim budget and the actual budget for the last 3 elections, beginning from FY4, I think every time the actual fiscal deficit has been different from the interim fiscal deficit by not more than 10 to 20 basis points. So by that logic, the fiscal deficit should be close to 5% or maybe a little 10 basis points lower than the 5% in the budget, which is going to be presented on July 23.
Right, Mr. Ghosh, I'm going to quickly go down to your suggestions, because I think that's what's important for us to hear and for policymakers to hear as well. You do say that MSP politics is stifling the continued shift to smart and emerging agriculture practices. You want to elaborate on that and tell me what would you like seeing being done by the FM in the next couple of weeks in terms of a budget announcement around this?
See, I think if you look into the total value of the agricultural output in India, it is around 56 trillion. This is the FY23 numbers as per CSO. Out of this, 17% is only the food grain share, of which 6% is supported by MSP. So 6% of 17% of 56 trillion, that makes it around 3.5 trillion, which is the MSP support. Even after the government procuring, I think more than 90% of the rice from Punjab and more than around 75% of the wheat from Punjab. Of course, there are other states, but important to say is that the Punjab and Haryana actually corner the maximum share of procurement in terms of production. So my simple point is that while MSP as a policy is good, but possibly if there is too much emphasis on MSP, on that 17% out of the 100% share, you are actually missing out on other sectors like the livestock, the fruits and vegetables, the fishing, the cash crops. These together constitute 83%. So our simple suggestion, which we have put out in the budget, is that while MSP is important to support a section of farmers, but it is also important that we support the agricultural value chain in that 56 trillion division,
Right.
which we given out. So this is basically, and I think some of the policy changes which we have suggested in the budget may not be in the realm of the government, but at least some of these policy changes are also in the realm of the Reserve Bank of India. So my simple suggestion is that if there are some small regulatory changes which are low-hanging fruits, the agricultural sector can actually look into a decisive growth path in the next decade or so. Just for your information, I think every day if you open the newspaper, you will find that there's a significant number of articles on the agricultural value chain. But do you know that the agricultural value chain is not defined in the Indian context? So no one knows where the financing or the supplying of finance could start in that value chain. So these are very simple things which could be done in the budget or outside the budget so that the rural sector gets a push.
This is such a good point, but let's talk actionables, right? I mean, I'm sure this is a want and there is a need to address that 83% of the agriculture space that currently is being ignored because the focus is so much more on MSP only. But in terms of actionables, while the policy and the mindset needs to be changed, what are those actionables that you're looking for at this budget or even outside the budget, like you said, to boost and spruce up the rural economy?
So, for example, the first thing is that there is a circular in the RBI, and I think the government is also aware of that, which allows the farmers to be given an KCC loan of only up to 1.6 lakhs. So the RBI circular said that loans beyond 1.6 lakhs will require collateral. A simple thing is that now land records are digitized across states. Why that cannot be used as a collateral to give a loan above 1.6 lakh to the farmer? So this is the first point. The second point is that a simple suggestion which I am mentioning, and I think this could be done on a very quickly basis, is that whenever you take a loan from a bank or a financial institutions, the way to if you service your interest, the loan remains a performing account. But for the agricultural sector, what happens is that every year the KCC loan, the farmer has to repay back the interest and the principal amount fully so that he can get that up to 1.6 lakh loans for the next year. This has been in practice for the last 50 years or so when the Indian economy got independence. But I think the high time has now come to change this rule. Basically, if the farmer can service the interest rate, he should continue to get the principal amount as loan also every year. So this is another policy. The other policy is that we talk to the agricultural value chain, which is also in the government domain, is that define an agricultural value chain. How do you define an agricultural value chain? For example, you define that who will get the finance, the input suppliers, and the others. So clearly define that the agricultural value chain in the process so that it is easy for the banks and the financial institution to supply and make this value chain fully operative over a point of time. Right now, we only know that the value chain has to be supported, but no one knows where the value chain actually starts, where it starts with the procurement of seeds, where it starts with the procurement of inputs. It is absolutely not clear. So I think this was submitted to the government in a 2021 report. The report has 13 to 14 suggestions, which we have listed in our report. And I think even if government does 40 to 50% of that in conjunction with the Reserve Bank, I think the agricultural sector can get a boost. And please note, these are all executive decisions. This doesn't have to go through the parliament in terms of an approval.